I have the Messiers here today, Pat and Kim. They refused to do it unless I did it together, which is good, actually, because you guys are kind of like together, really, in a weird way. I mean, you know, I think of you together, not independently as much anymore.
Well, we're together all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we write together.
Yeah.
We live together. We collect together. We have fun together.
Yeah. And you both can bounce things off as far as knowledge and different things. And one may remember one thing while you might not. And, of course, Pat has this incredible history of working in the Native American art field. Since when? When did you start working in the field? It's been a long time. I've known you 31 years, by the way. I know how long I've known you.
It's first time I worked in a Native American art store was when I was still in high school. And that was late 49, I think, or 50.
And where'd you grow up?
I grew up right in Tucson. I'm a native.
You're a native Tucson. And were your folks from Tucson, too?
No, they came from Illinois in 1920.
Here?
To Tucson.
Wow.
And they were headed for San Diego on the train.
Yeah?
Because my dad was told to come out to San Diego for his health.
Did he have, like, TB or something?
Well, not really. I don't know what it was. But when they got into Tucson and got off the train, he went over and he'd worked for the railroad back in Illinois. And what was the railroad, Kim?
It was the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, CB&Q.
Yeah. And they hired him right then. So they got their luggage off the train and stayed.
That's hilarious. I wonder, it must have been like October or November. It was really nice weather. He might not have taken that job if it was June or July.
He loved it here. They both really liked it here. And
so he worked for the railroad his whole life?
Yes.
Wow.
He retired in 1965 and was number 1 on the seniority board.
Wow. Yeah. And so what did he do? What was his?
He was a conductor.
Yeah, he did a conductor.
Started as a brakeman, of course.
And did you get to go on the train and ever?
Oh, yeah, we rode quite often.
Yeah, for fun, right?
Oh, we went lots of places.
Did you get to make the horn go?
Oh, no, I was never on the engine because...
They wouldn't let you on the engine?
No.
No.
That's a safety violation.
I was on a caboose.
Yeah.
But no, we had drawing rooms when we went. And it was really nice.
And tell me what a drawing room is. I'm not a trained person.
It's a room that has your own restroom in it.
Okay.
It has your own beds that let down in it. And it's you have a table where you can eat your meals if you want to. It's a good-sized room. It's almost the size of this right in here.
Yeah, I'm thinking immediately, okay, artist room, our drawing room.
The train was the way to travel back then.
Yeah, I could see that.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe still
Oh,
the
and
way
the club
to
cars were nice.
Yeah.
Until you hit Texas. Because then you couldn't have any alcohol on the train.
And so you grow up in Tucson, and when you're a kid, so you graduated high school in what, 49 something?
I graduated in 51.
In 51. So how many people were in Tucson in 51?
I have no
25,000 maybe?
But there wasn't many because really the main part of town stopped right around Campbell. And which we lived on 8th Street in Martin. Excuse me.
Down by the university, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the university hadn't spread out near as far as what it was.
Yeah, and so did Sabino Canyon at that time. This part of the talk is really just for everybody who loves Tucson stuff. So I'm sorry if you don't live in Tucson, but tough luck. I want to find out about this stuff. So Sabino Canyon, you could drive your car up there, right, and park and do.
We'd go up there for picnics.
Yeah.
And to go to Mount Lemmon, early on, you had to go the back way and go up through Oracle.
Because there was no road?
No road going up the front way. And then the prisoners built the road during the war, during 1945.
I understand there was a lot of conscientious objectors, and Hopis were among the crews.
That were building it?
Mm-hmm.
And this was in what years?
During the war?
During the war.
World War II?
World War II, I see. That's when they started building it.
Because Tucson was a small town. I mean,
Yeah.
Mount Lemmon was a long drive because you'd go out Catalina finally,
Right.
and then you'd go up Catalina, and then you had to wait up on 1 hour, down on the other hour.
Mm-hmm.
It was one way.
And what high school did you go to?
Tucson High, the only high school in Tucson other than Amphi, and we didn't put them in Tucson.
And so your graduating year was 51?
51.
And so during high school, though, you started working as selling in native arts?
Yes,
and
in a downtown store is, his name was Mr. Fine, but what was,
Al Fine, and the store was El Chico on Scott.
yeah,
El Chico. And was it just Native American stuff?
Native American.
100%?
It was a curio shop.
Yeah. And so did they have, you may
There
have
was a lot of them in Tucson.
Yeah, I know. I remember when I came here in 1990, there was a bunch of old kind of stores that sold Native American stuff. Not really great stuff. It was more curio by that time. And I think Bates wasn't there, but Patania had moved, I think, from there.
Well, he moved out here in 37.
Yeah.
And
I
he'd
knew
moved
that.
by 1990. I think Frank Jr. had moved it to the old Adobe, El Adobe out on Broadway.
Yeah, that sounds right. And so what was your responsibility? And you're what, 18, 17? This is 1950.
I was sales clerk.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you the truth, I saw a concho belt I wanted, so I got a job.
So you could buy it.
Because I went to school with a lot of the gals that were, had concho belts and everything because their folks worked in that. I went to school with Frank Sr.
Frank Jr.
Jr.
Yeah.
And he was a year ahead of me.
And he was in high school with you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
And
Wow.
You also went to school with like Beverly Lockett.
Yeah, Beverly
I
Lockett.
know Beverly too.
And,
I got to have her on. Bev, you got to come on, by the way.
Yeah, and also Mary Ann Sunt with the Sunts. And, a lot of the people that, had shops. And they're the Sunt Construction Company. And they all could afford the concho belts and everything.
And you couldn't, so you said, I'm going to get it. And did you get it?
Oh, yes.
Do you still have it?
No.
That's a good Indian art dealer right there.
I have upgraded.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And so did you recognize at that time that you had a love or there was something about the art form that you really liked? Or what was it?
Well, I always was a collector of something, whether it was matchbook covers
that I
or
know
what.
and believe.
And I've
been to your house.
And I just had to collect something. And we had bracelets that we would wear all the way up our arm, the little twist ones.
Show them your Lomolo. By the way, people are not watching this. You can see we've got and we've got a Paul Sofsky there. All these beautiful bracelets. I've got my little piece on Kenneth
Little
Begay.
Kenneth Begay, yes. We all seem to come with the big guns today.
We just did. So how long did you work for Mr. Fine was his name?
I don't know. I don't remember. But it was like after school and on weekends.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you do after you graduated?
After I graduated, well, I got married and had a child and then got divorced. And then...
in that order?
In that order. Well, let's see, I can say graduated in 51, got married in 52, had a child in 53, and got divorced in 54. And then I
hired on with the Southern Pacific right after that.
Yeah, and I went to work for the Southern Pacific. I worked for the Tucson newspapers for a while as in the photography end of it. And jack of all trade. And then when I married my second husband, her father, he worked for the railroad. I met him at the railroad while I was working there.
Yeah.
And he passed away in
1989.
Yeah.
And by that time, we had been to California, and I worked over in California some.
And but you weren't doing native arts then yet?
Oh, yes.
In California, you were.
I did native arts all my life.
Okay.
I was raised with it.
So even when you were working for the railroad and when you were working as a photographer, were you still dealing or in native art?
I was buying it.
You were buying
collecting it.
Yeah, you were collecting it more than selling.
My parents had a lot of baskets that my dad didn't know my mother stored in a big trunk, and he gave it away to somebody coming down the street.
Oh,
she says, "Where'd all the baskets go?" But
But it wasn't heavy collecting in
it wasn't,
native art.
Yeah, I wasn't heavy in native art, but I did jewelry basically.
Yeah, and at that point, was there any time during that time that you go, I'd like to do this kind of as an avocation?
Not really.
Or did you just kind of fell into
I just
it?
knew. And I had when we were living in San Diego, I had a shop in La Mesa that it was Messier Interiors and Antiques. And I carried Native American stuff.
And what years were those? Do you know?
In
The
the
late
70s.
70s, when I was in high school, she'd started working as an interior designer in the early to mid 70s, and then eventually went out on her own and also bought an antique store on La Mesa Boulevard in La Mesa, California.
Early 70s?
Mid to late 70s.
Yeah, this was getting to the mid 70s when I opened the store. Oh, wait, no, it was the late ones, late 70s.
Did you know of any of the players that were doing Indian art at that time? The Munns and the...
The
Munn
Munns
was
were
in
right
San
down.
Diego.
Yeah, Munn was
I know,
in San
right?
Diego, right down the street from me.
But we didn't really know them.
No.
But I ended up, I was in there. I had bought some rings, and I got one for me and one for my husband. And when now I look back and I know they were Lolamas, and I sold them in the antique store.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't sure, and somebody came in and bought them right away.
Yeah. Smiling as they went out.
Uh-huh. And but I didn't. I didn't carry a lot of jewelry, but I had jewelry in there. But it was mostly furnishings and
Americana.
Americana.
So you have a wide variety of knowledge in a lot of different fields, then clearly. And so, how long did you have the antique store in?
Well, my
La Mesa?
husband got transferred to Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
And we moved up there in
Late 1979. I had just graduated high school, was preparing to go to college, but hadn't. I was in community college and just hadn't really had a good job. And we moved, I moved with them when they moved up to Glendale, California, late 79.
And what were you thinking you wanted to do?
I wanted to be a cinematographer or a photojournalist. That didn't happen.
But did you try?
A little bit. I was taking photography classes at the community college before we moved to California, up to Glendale. And then I was thinking cinematographer. I was really fascinated with motion pictures, but I knew someone who was an actress and kind of got a little bit into that vein. And I was like, I don't think I can work with these people. So I kind of just worked. I got a job in a bookstore, Walden Books in the Glendale Galleria. And I just worked and never really gave a lot of thought about what I was going to do for my future.
And what were you thinking about for your daughter? What did you hope she wanted to do?
I didn't really have hopes out. I mean, it was her life.
Yeah, let her do what she was going to do.
Do what she was going to do.
Were you working in any of the stores when you were in La Mesa and that kind of stuff?
I would help her in the antique store, and occasionally I worked in delicatessen that was a friend of ours owned. But mostly it was antiques, and then I got into books, got into Walden Books and got into books. We always liked books.
Right.
But that
By the way,
just
here's the books some of the things they've written. At this point, for those people who we'll talk about these, but this is one of the reasons we're here today too, is to talk about some of these books that they've written. But did Walden Books sell just new books, or did they sell antique books too?
They were a chain bookstore.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't know
And they just sold new books. And it was really just the popular stuff, really, novels and art books and what was, because it was a very small store, mall store, didn't have a big footprint. And so there weren't a lot of titles to remember.
Yeah. And how long did you do the Walden books?
I worked at 3 different Walden books because at the time, once we got up to Glendale, because of my father's situation, we kind of moved every 6 months.
They moved him. It was...
He'd had a stroke when we were living in San Diego, and he could no longer work on the road. So he decided to go become a dispatcher, which is the railroad equivalent of air traffic controller. So he went to school, and then once he graduated...
That's where they sent him to
to school in Los Angeles. Once he graduated, now he's low man on the seniority board. So he basically went where he could get work, and he started kind of in Burbank, and then went to Sacramento, and came to Tucson, and had to go back to Los Angeles.
That was a tough time, huh?
Kind of.
Yeah, I can see it in your face.
And that's that was one reason we just could never settle, and I could never really get enough money to enroll in college, and we weren't settled. So I just went from one Walden Books to another, from Glendale Galleria to Citrus Heights in Sacramento area, back to Park Mall. Then we went back to California. I didn't work for that time. We were there when we were in California. And then my father had a big stroke.
In 1984.
1984. And he was
during
disabled.
The Olympics. We were in Los Angeles.
Were you watching it?
Well...
No.
My father was in the hospital, and I went down to watch the Olympic torch run by. That's what I remember. But no, we didn't go to the games.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it was...
And then in that early 1985, we moved back to Tucson permanently.
And had you gone back to school yet?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
So we'll get to that point. So you come into Tucson in 1985.
We come back in 85. And then I started working for Morningstar Traders.
Yeah.
And I worked there for 13 years.
Yeah. And that's where I actually first met you. I remember. First thing I did when I got to Tucson.
Yeah.
I was doing...
Well, you'd come over for your lunch.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I did my... That's exactly right. I did my residency at the U of A. And I was like, this has got great art. And, I would come over there and I would only talk to you. You were the only one there. And you'd show me stuff and look at all this great jewelry and these blankets. And I was like, oh my God, these are so fantastic and expensive. And I was like, I didn't make anything as a resident. It was they made nothing. But I remember you very vividly.
Well, I ran the store as a manager for 13 years.
Yeah.
And then I retired from there and went to work with David West.
Yes. Yeah.
Gallery West.
Yes.
And we worked together. I didn't
You were a
work for
team,
him.
right?
As
Yeah.
you always said, we were a team.
Yeah, you were a team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you kind of were always there, right? I mean, David came in when he came in, but
well, that was the way Rick was.
Yeah. He was David's joy really was finding the material, right? Would that
Yes. Well, and he did the beadwork and the expensive blankets and that kind of stuff, where I did the jewelry and the pottery and what have you.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about David. David West, so he passed away last year, and at 59, he was a young guy. And
very young.
Yeah.
He passed away February of 2021.
Yeah.
He was born the same year I was. It was
really shocking.
It was really shocking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he was really, one thing I always say about David West is he always had a smile on his face and was kind of bubbly and giggly.
Yeah.
And
well, he was a good guy.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, and he was super knowledgeable when it came, especially to beadwork. I always just kind of associated with beadwork. That was his thing.
Well, and I mean, he had such a memory. He had bought a shirt from another dealer, a beaded shirt, and he said he knew he had seen it someplace before, and he found it in the Smithsonian, and he went back there, and
he found the photograph.
Yeah, the photograph, and so they counted the beads on the shirt, and also in the photograph, and it was the same shirt. It was
that Chief Joseph wore
when he said, "I will fight no more forever."
How did it get out of the Smithsonian? Do they know?
It
wasn't in the Smithsonian. It ended up getting into a private collection somehow.
Yeah.
And had gone from hand to hand to hand and lost the provenance. And David was the one who was able to bring the provenance back to it.
Yeah, because he had recognized, he'd seen that imagery somewhere. Yeah, and he had originally had like an ice house, right? He had done...
Yes, he built a...
very successful.
Ready Ice.
I thought it was Valley Ice.
Oh, Valley. Maybe it was
And
Valley.
I think he sold it to Ready Ice.
Yeah. Anyway, he sold it.
And then did what he really wanted to do, which was native arts, right? Indian
Yeah.
art. That's what he really liked. Antique stuff. That was really...
Yeah, he liked the older stuff. And he was into a lot of things. And he had such a photographic memory like Kim has that he could see something and he could remember where it was. And he did very well for himself in that business.
Yeah, no, he was always successful. And he kept the business model small and lean. It's just you two guys, right, really? But a really beautiful space up in the foothills. Yeah. And, you know, just, it seemed to work very nicely.
And it was. And then I had quite a few health problems, and I worked for him for about 10 years. And when I was 75, I decided enough.
Yeah.
Enough. I will retire. But, and then I still working in it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you retired from what? Going to the store, but that's about it. I mean, you guys are still very active, at least maybe not buying and selling, but you're still buying.
We're still buying, and we're still...
The more buying is the aspect, I see.
We thin our collection periodically.
Yeah. So at some point, let's go back over to Kim now. This is fun. So, all right, so she's working at Morning Star. And what are you doing at this point? Have you gone back to college?
No, I never made it back to college. Yeah. I started working to earn money to try to go to college.
Yes.
I started working at a video store.
What's that? For those people who don't know what a video store is.
Yeah, that was the old times where you used to go rent video cassettes and put them in your VCR at home and watch the movies and then bring them back the next day. Yeah. I was managing a video store in town.
And what did you like about that job?
The movies. I was still into movies.
Yeah, I wondered about that. I mean, because you're into books, right?
Really into books.
And there's not a big difference, in my opinion, from cinematography to books. They're all stories, right?
They're all stories.
Yeah. So did you really, one of these individuals that watched all the videos, all the movies, and would make the recommendations, Kim's picks?
No, I didn't do that. Okay. But I did watch a lot of movies.
Yeah.
I did, and I'm not so much anymore. I'm seriously out of interest in movies. I worked in a mall Indian art shop. When we left Sacramento in 1985 and moved to Tucson, we were just here for like a year. But when I left, and one of my coworkers at the bookstore gave me, she was an art student. She had painted a kachina as one of their like art projects, a kachina doll. And she gave me that. And I thought, oh, how nice. Somebody gave me some original art and I'm going to frame it and decorate around it. So I started buying little pieces of Indian pottery. And I thought, ooh, how interesting it would be to have a piece from every Pueblo. So I started buying books and reading on the pottery and the Pueblos. And
Rick Dillingham's?
I was buying like Tambati books. I was really in the very beginning stages. Okay. I think about a decent piece of Hopi pottery, but I had some really low-end pottery.
Right. But from every other Pueblo, right?
I never got from every Pueblo. No, I never got from every Pueblo. No. I really got interested in Hopi. I really became fascinated with Hopi and started reading a lot, like Frank Waters' Book of the Hopi, and just really started getting into the culture of Hopi and Navajo, but mostly, the mesas just fascinated me. So started kind of getting into that material culture. When we went back to California for that little 6-month period or 12-month period when my father had a stroke, we were doing antique shows. We always did antiquing. Pat was an antiquer when I was a kid. We'd go there was a great antique show in Glendale once a month. And I found a Hopi, a wedding basket, an old coil from like the 20s. And it was $50. And I was like, oh, God, how am I going to buy this? And I went to Pat and I said, can I please borrow $50? I will pay you back. And I bought that basket, and we still own it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she pay you back?
I did.
Yeah.
With interest.
Yeah. That sounds right. Okay.
So when we got back to Tucson, I did the video store thing, and then I also worked in one of the mall shops for 6 or 8 months.
That sold Indian art?
Sold Indian art.
Do you remember the name of it at all?
Yeah, it was Eagle Dancer.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'd have me go over to Chaparral and Park Mall.
Yeah.
Eagle Dancer in El Con. That was an experience.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
And then I hired on with Haunted Bookshop in 1987.
Mm.
And that was where my love of books was solidified.
Mm.
And I worked there until it closed I think it closed in April of 1997. And I left about a month or two later. I hired on with Mark Bhatti, Bhatti Indian Arts, and I would have stayed there, except I couldn't get health insurance. So I had to go find a job that offered me health insurance. And I ended up in manufacturing, which is a really good job. That particular job wasn't the best, but it taught me a lot. And I was there for 6 years until he closed down.
And who is this that closed down?
It made hotel motel furniture, and the company was Caseworks Furniture.
I heard of them.
You shouldn't have heard of it.
Yeah.
Not anything anyone local really knew about unless they worked there.
Caseworks. Didn't they make boxes and things too? Seems like I used them for something.
They had a crating division at one time.
Yeah.
And I think the crating division might still be in existence.
Yeah.
Caseworks Crating. I'm not positive.
And so you did that for how long?
I was a buyer there, and they taught me purchasing for 6 years.
Yeah.
But after 9/11, there was a good chunk of time where nobody ordered hotel motel furniture.
Yeah, I bet.
Travel stopped. Who's going to renovate their hotel? And they hung on till about 2003, and they finally closed the business. From there, I went to manage an eBay consignment store because I'd gotten really heavily into eBay.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted for a couple of years.
Yeah, what was that like doing that full time?
It was interesting. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I would think. Well, you got to use your photography skills, right?
Got to use the photography skills, people skills, research skills.
Right.
And I'd learned so much from Pat from the antique field that I was able to put a lot of that knowledge into play.
And that was just take everything in and sell it for people, right? Kind of thing?
We'd vet it. We wouldn't take everything.
Yeah.
We wouldn't take anything that wouldn't sell for at least $20. And we tried to get, obviously, the more expensive stuff. Learned a lot about buying and selling habits. Like September's a dead month on eBay. You wouldn't think it would be, but September is dead.
Yeah.
January is a really good month to sell.
To sell?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think that is? People have money from Christmas, maybe?
I'm guessing. I never have figured it out. I've assumed that September was a bad month to sell because everybody was getting their kids back in school. I guess January was a good month to sell because people didn't have anything else better to do but buy on eBay.
And so you did that for how many years? 2 years?
It was about 2 years.
Okay. And then what?
Then I hired on with my current employer. I've been there 15 years.
Yeah, so you like this one.
I like this one. I like this one a lot.
And I can see it in your face.
Yeah, it's a really good place to work.
Well, and at some point in time, you both kind of go, okay, we need to do some giving back with our knowledge and start to write books. When did that happen?
I started thinking about writing books while I was at Haunted Bookshop. And that's when I actually started writing. I did book reviews for the local newspaper, Desert Leaf. Mm-hmm. And then I finally... Is it still
around, by the way? I don't know.
Possibly.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while. Okay.
And then I was able to move up to doing reviews for Publishers Weekly, which was really enjoyable, really entertaining. I enjoyed reviewing for Publishers Weekly. And I learned a lot about writing, learned a lot about book publishing, had a lot of authors as friends from, working in the bookstore. And I just got the idea in my mind, I want to write a book. And Pat wasn't really on board with it.
And why not, Pat?
Well, I was still working,
Yeah.
and I was busy, and I had more fun going out and buying stuff and the hunt.
Yeah.
And
The hunt and the kill.
Yeah.
I've been that way my whole life.
What is that about when you find something, that no one really understands but you? What's that feeling?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And when you, because we have built our collection on,
The hunt.
yeah, on the hunt like that, and on a budget,
Yeah. No, I know.
because both of us, worked.
We're
And,
just working girls.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We may give the illusion.
I mean,
But-
I've worked in construction.
Yeah.
I was superintendent on the construction job for a while. I did the model homes, and that's when we were in San Diego area.
Is there one piece or find that you can share, that you want to share, that was that great find?
Oh, I think we both know the holy grail of our collection.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you saw it.
Yeah.
It's the Awa Sarah painting.
Yeah.
It is. And we were so lucky to be able to get that, because it was Strassenbach's painting,
Right.
and Awa Sarah drew it for him and gave it to him, and it was 36,
1936.
Yeah.
1936.
It's the iconic Kosharis on Rainbow
Yeah.
painting, which is, most people associate with Awa Sarah.
Yep.
And he did one for Charles Strassenbach and signed it to my friend Charles Strassenbach, 1936, Awa Sarah. And we can take the provenance right back to Charles Strassenbach.
Yeah.
It's only been through a few hands.
And then you found out the other Strassenbach information when we found those tiles.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that there's Strassenbach associated with those tiles, but those tiles put Awa Sarah up in Colorado
Yeah.
a little earlier than we thought.
Yeah, which was interesting. Well, and that's the interesting thing, I think, about this business, is the holes get filled in periodically that you didn't know, if you're smart enough or patient enough to look and be open. Go, oh, that fits in like that.
Well, that one fell in our lap.
Yeah.
It was
That painting.
Yeah.
that painting did. It was, and we got other things that really shocked us also, like the copper work of his, those great big trays.
Yes.
That came out of the same collection.
Yeah.
And it was came directly from Strassenbach's wife to her niece, and then on the market.
And had you written this book yet, the Garden of the Gods book?
When we got the Awa Sarah painting?
Yeah.
Yes, we had. As a matter of fact, it had just come out when
So
the
this had
painting
come out.
was offered to us.
And so it was offered maybe because of the book?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was it? So this is a book they did called Garden of the Gods, Trading Post. What was it that you go, I want to write about the Garden of the Gods? I think it's very interesting.
Well, they kind of asked us to, after we had mentioned them in our Reassessing Hallmark book. We had
Was that your first book?
No. The
Hopi
first,
and Pueblo Tiles was our first
That was the
book.
first book. Okay.
and then when we wrote Reassessing Hallmarks, we wrote a little bit about them, because we had been up. I can't remember why we were up there. We'd
taken a trip in
just
like the 80s and up
Yeah.
to Colorado, and we went in there. And at the time, it wasn't much. I think the current owners had just gotten it from Strassenbach's estate. They were working to turn it into a viable business, because we were there, I think, in the early 80s.
and we walked in and walked out.
And we weren't impressed. But when we were researching Reassessing Hallmarks, we ran across the Hallmark handmade, solid silver handmade by Indians. And
Right.
we had to figure out where it came from. We had some clues. We figured out that not only that, but the earlier Hallmark handmade at the Indian was one of the earliest shop marks that was ever used.
What year would have that been used?
1925 to 1929.
Yeah, it's really early.
Really early. So we had to give it space in the book. And we did our research basically on the phone. they did the best they could with us. Unfortunately, they couldn't help us that much because they had to close down that summer due to the Waldo fire, which was raging through Colorado Springs. But they helped us as much as they could, and we were able to get quite a bit of information in there. After Reassessing Hallmarks was published, we thought we'd go back up to Colorado Springs and take a look at the Trading Post, because we always wanted to, while we were researching, we thought, this is a fascinating place.
Yeah.
And we called and asked if we could meet with the owners. And the owners came in. We were up there for a week in 2015, after Reassessing Hallmarks was published. And we met with the owners, and they talked to us, and we found out a lot of information we hadn't known before. And before we left, one of them said, would you consider writing a history for us? We'd self-publish it, and we'd... And we said...
A pamphlet.
Yeah. We said, we can do that. So we got back home, and we jumped into the research. And the more we researched, the more we found, because actually that's about half of a manuscript that we had. An awful lot of Native Americans were up in Manitou Springs and Colorado Springs working from the 1910s until probably about the 50s, 60s. And I know some of them even relocated there, mostly Pueblos, some Navajos. And we had another manuscript, and we offered it to one of the publishers, and they were like, no, thank you. And we kind of took a step back and said, ooh, this is a mess. So we just pulled out what was pertinent to Garden of the Gods Trading Post, proposed to Arcadia. We were going to try and get in with the History Press. And they said, too many photographs and not enough text. But our Images of America branch would be interested. So it went there, and they accepted it. And we ended up publishing it, and the Trading Post was really happy with the results.
Yeah, and probably it's a big seller still, I would assume.
Oh,
I
yes.
think they do
They're
well with
using
it.
it for tour guides.
Yeah, I would think so. It's a wonderful book. And where can people get that book?
It's available on Amazon. It's available at Arcadia,
Yeah.
Arcadia Publishing. It's available in Colorado Springs, I'm sure, in a lot of the stores, and it's available at Garden of the Gods Trading Post.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great little book. I've read it a couple times.
Thank you.
The history of it was just so interesting.
Charles Strausenbach was a fascinating man.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah. No, he wasn't very interesting. And a supporter of the Denver Art Museum.
Yes.
And is that painting is that going to be donated to the herd, or the one
Yes.
you have?
Our entire collection will be donated to
Yeah.
the herd once both of us are gone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great museum. Now,
It
how
is.
did you
And
get into this, the Hallmarks? So this is really kind of put you guys on the map. This is a Hallmark book and something that we use regularly in our business.
Yeah.
How did that all happen, and why?
That was because we were friends with Barton and Margaret Wright. And Barton had mistakes in his book, which he didn't have a computer at the time he was doing this. There was no way other than traveling and going in and asking somebody what this is. And Margaret and him would come along. When I was working at Morning Star, they'd come in, and he was writing his Hallmark book. He needed to look at the jewelry, and he'd ask me who made it. Margaret would write it down, and then she described the hallmark to him, and he would draw it out of his memory.
Yeah.
And he didn't, instead of looking at it.
Right.
And they'd put a name with it. And they would go to all these trading posts in different places and do this, and that's how he did his book. Well, there's bound to be mistakes.
Yeah.
Because there was some in there that he could not know any different, because somebody would say, oh yeah, that belongs to so-and-so.
I got that from Keith Palmer. So Keith Palmer ended up having a Hallmark who was actually a trader.
He was a trader himself, but he was in there in the Hallmark book. So we thought, well, we'll straighten this out.
But it kind of was a synthesis. When we were thinking of publishing a book, Pat collected tiles. I was collecting Navajo-style Hopi-made jewelry. And it was kind of a toss-up. Which subject matter do we write about first? Write what you know. And we decided tiles would be easier because nothing had been written about tiles. And we had Barton to help us. Barton was our mentor.
This is Barton Wright.
Barton Wright.
Mm-hmm.
Barton helped us a lot. Helped us through the publishing process on Hopi and Pueblo tiles. So we decided to do that first. And we were going to hold off on the jewelry book later, which was basically going to be Hopi jewelry. Kind of an expansion of Margaret Wright's Hopi silver. After the tile book was published and we decided, let's go into a jewelry book, we thought, the Hopi silver book has been done. Margaret did it well.
Mm-hmm.
We really can't do that. But I was interested in Hallmarks. We wanted to do something on Hallmarks.
What was it about Hallmarks that interested you?
I have no idea. I just became fascinated with them. And that little stamp on the back of a piece of jewelry could tell you so much about the piece of jewelry. It just intrigued me, and I just kind of went head first into it.
Well, we wanted to get it right also.
Yeah.
And Kim has such a good memory that when she sees a Hallmark, she can remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And she will research until she can find it. And so we decided we would straighten up some of the mistakes, which we did in there, and we have proof of what we put in there. And
we can back everything up.
We can back it up.
And
Except there might be one bad misattribution in there, but we're not positive.
Which one is that?
It may be. We're not sure about Austin Wilson. We said so in the book.
Yeah.
We're not positive. We think we may have tracked down what Austin Wilson's really is, but we have no proof on it. But I think one of the crossed arrow hallmarks for City Sozi may be bad.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller one, not the big clunky one you see on concho belts, but the smaller one. We're not positive. We were at the time, but we've seen other things that have made us question that particular attribution.
Yeah, and how do you track something down, if like an Austin Wilson or somebody who's not alive to go and talk to? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, one way is remembering, like Kim does, what she has seen before. And in an old American Indian art book, a magazine, she had seen where Catherine Wilson had used the Hallmark and said it was it, and it was printed in there.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big mistakes in Barton's book is the confusion of Austin Wilson and Ike Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he thought they were the same person or if they were brothers or what. He gave the same hallmark to both individuals. And we were able to track down that Ike Wilson used the bow and arrow by confirming that Catherine Wilson used Ike's hallmark after he died. And that in this 1976 American Indian Art magazine, there was an ad for Ellis Tanner. And it's a big orange full page and has all the hallmarks of the individuals he was working with, from Preston Menanier to lots of other great silversmiths. And in there is Catherine Wilson's hallmark, and it's the bow and arrow that has been identified with Austin Wilson forever.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to say, nope, this actually belonged to Ike Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had enough conversations with dealers who have been in the business long enough that Austin Wilson and Ike Wilson were not related. They weren't even related by clan. So there's no way Austin Wilson would have used that hallmark.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know for me, at least for paintings, actually the last thing I look at is the signature. I actually look at the piece first, because signatures and hallmarks, and they can all be fake. They can all be added.
Yeah.
Too true.
And so I find that, I think that's something for people to realize when we talk about hallmarks. A hallmark is only as good as the piece of jewelry you're looking at. So,
Yeah.
That's true.
you have to really go, oh, you looked at my bracelet, Kim, and you go, is that Begay? Yeah, is that Kenneth Begay? I mean, you could look at it.
Well, it's obvious Kenneth Begay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the ironwood.
I didn't even have to
stuff.
see the hallmark.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. See, that's the thing about collecting, and those people who are listening, especially jewelry, is, it's the piece first and then the hallmark or the signature. And, and a lot of this stuff we attribute because we don't know, it's not signed, and we say, well, we think it's, such and such because of this and that. So when did this book come out, The Hallmarks of Native Southwest?
Summer of 2014.
2014. And how long did it take you to put that group of Hallmarks together. And you also have a lot
Well,
of information about different trading posts and different things that had, and different UTA and
UITA and the
yeah.
Indian Arts and Crafts
yeah,
Board.
exactly.
You know, a couple of our particular fascinations are with the jewelry made for the Indian Arts and Crafts
Yeah.
Board silver stamping project from 1938 to 1943.
Yeah.
And the early Hopi from the GI Bill classes that were like 1947 to 1952,
Yeah.
approximately.
51.
Those are our big fascinations. But we'd been collecting. A lot of the jewelry in that book belonged to us.
Mm-hmm.
We'd been collecting. I collected Hallmarks. I didn't collect jewelry. I collected Hallmarks, and I still do to some extent.
Would you actually, when you say that, you would collect the piece because of the Hallmark,
Mm-hmm.
or would you just collect an image of the Hallmark?
Sometimes both,
Yeah.
but more frequently now I collect a piece because of the Hallmark. If it's a rare Hallmark, if it's an unidentified Hallmark, I
Mhm.
know if I have the piece in my hands, I have the capability of following through if any evidence ever comes up to who it might belong to.
Well, she gets lots of people sending her messages. Can you tell me who this
I'm
Hallmark
sure.
is?
Because I'm
Yeah.
on social media. I have a large social media presence. Social media is really not Pat's thing,
Yeah.
but I keep us in the spotlight by keeping a social media presence. So I get private messaged frequently.
I
Do you
bet.
know who this Hallmark is?
Right.
And a lot of them are, I have to attribute to Anglo in the 70s because so much of that jewelry was made by Anglos, and so many of the Hallmarks, well, why would they be collected? Because nobody has collected much in the way of Anglo jewelry.
Right.
Mostly what's been documented are Native American silversmiths.
But there is a large amount of Hallmarks by Native artists, especially Navajos, that we just don't know.
We
who
just
they are.
don't know.
I mean, it's a Navajo made,
Mm-hmm.
and the Hallmark is like, well, we just don't know who that is.
And you have to look at the jewelry. The Hallmark alone cannot help with the attribution.
Yeah.
You have to look at the jewelry,
That's
the
right.
construction, and the materials that are used.
Yeah.
That gives you a really good clue as to who might have made it.
So when you came out with this book, how did that change the way people looked at you and what you did?
I don't know that it changed much.
No.
Did for me.
Did it?
It did, because not that I looked at you, how I looked at you as like, okay, these are real experts that I need to be able to reference and use and help and cite. And I think I thought more of you as collectors and dealers, but when the books come out and you're starting to give all this great information, I looked at you as, these are individuals that are giving back to the community and are adding something to our community and are experts. And it did change the way I think it did. It changed the way I looked at you.
Well,
A
thank you.
lot of dealers do not agree, as you said, because they heard all their life that Austin Wilson is that mark and they don't want to change.
Yeah.
And they've also heard that natives didn't start signing silver until the 1970s. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to write the book.
1970s.
Yes, was to prove that natives started signing much earlier,
Yeah.
as early as the 1920s.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons that we decided the book was important. And we like to tell stories. We like to research. And we like to share our knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, what good is it?
Well, we
Who
shared
does
a
it-
lot of hallmarks with
Billy Hogarth,
Bill
right?
Hogarth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, after this came out.
And us, too, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, we wanted to see him put a book out that wasn't copied from Barton's completely.
Right.
Because the drawings, Barton had no way of taking photographs at that time of hallmarks.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
after this came out, we had this database of hallmarks that we didn't know what to do with. And we'd considered updating Barton's book, the Barton's Hallmark book. And Pete Schifford even called Pat once and asked her if she'd consider updating Barton's book after he'd passed away. And we talked about it and we said, I work full time. I don't have time to do that.
To travel.
Travel and go, trading post to trading post, show to show, and talk to the silversmiths, and we just don't have the time. And so we said, what are we going to do with this Hallmark database? And Bill had published a couple of editions of his Southwestern Hallmark database, and we said, wonder if he would be interested in taking it and maybe having us, give him the information we know about Hallmarks and seeing if he could maybe do a complete, the most accurate Hallmark guide available. And when he approached him, and we'd never met him before, when we approached him, he seemed very grateful, very happy to incorporate our database, our knowledge, and he had us edit his 3rd and 4th editions.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always happy to help him put out the most accurate, most comprehensive, most complete Hallmark reference guide that's available on the market. And we're happy that he was willing and pleased to work with us.
Do you get native artists coming to you going, "Oh, I want to be in the book. I need to be in the book," or
no?
Or not, it just doesn't happen so often.
Not to us. I'm sure it happens to Bill all the time, but
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to us.
Yeah.
And,
Our research has taken us elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, yours is a lot of yours too is earlier Hallmarks, I think, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we sat, and Kim would sit also at night cutting. You take pictures of Hallmarks and then print them out and then cut them out and then paste them in Barton's book.
Well, that was part of my obsession with Hallmarks. I actually bought a copy of Barton's book and took it out of the binding and put it in a 3-ring binder, and then I would take images off eBay of Hallmarks, and I'd cut them out. I'd print them on paper and cut them out and paste them in the book, and I still have that. And I did it in Margaret's Hopi silver too. That was part of my obsession with Hallmarks, which at least it was not an obsession with something bizarre or.
No, it's a great thing. Well, I mean, it's a puzzle, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
It's a puzzle. You're putting,
and
it
it's
all
so
together.
exciting when you figure out a mark.
Yeah.
And there's a mark. We were presented with a mark over the summer, shortly after we'd submitted our last manuscript to the publisher. And it's taken us this long. We hope to have a blog about it by the end of the year. And at first I looked at it and I said, I've never seen that before. And then I think the particular collector came back and showed it to me again. And I said, you know what? Hold the phone. That rings a bell. And we've been able to track it. And it's a Hallmark nobody's ever identified before.
You know what? You want to share what it is?
No,
Okay.
not until the blog comes out.
All right. You can tell me after.
But it's a great one.
It is. It's a great one.
What's one of the rarest hallmarks that you would say is for jewelry, native jewelry? One that you've only seen occasionally, but know what it is. Is there one that sticks out?
Grant Jenkins is really rare. A Hopi silversmith who only worked a short time and died in 1933. We've only seen it a few times, and it's a coyote head. That's one of our favorite pieces of jewelry.
And it doesn't look anything like Barton Wright's drawing in his book.
No.
Because it looked more like a bear to me in the book, Barton's drawing, and this is definitely
a coyote head with an H.
Mm-hmm.
And the first good piece of jewelry, well, I wouldn't say the first, but one of our first finds was Pat found it. I was working at Haunted, and Pat calls me up and says, Jay Evans has come through. He's just been up to the High Noon show, and he's put the jewelry out and let me look through it that he has
and
left.
And this jewelry had been on his bed in his room up there for people to go through.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And she says, this one's got a hallmark, and it's an H and what looks like a coyote head. And I'm on the phone with her, and she's describing it to me. And I said, can I wear it? Does it fit us?
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I think it'll fit us. It'll fit us. And I said, buy it. And it was not very much money.
No, I paid $100 for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we still own it. And it was the very first Grant Jenkins Hallmark we ever saw.
And it's in the book.
It's in the book.
and
that's how we were able to collect.
We have been lucky. We have fallen into stuff.
And you make your luck.
We fell into this.
Yeah.
We fell into that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the Sofke is amazing.
Yeah. The Sofke is amazing. And the provenance takes it right back to the GI Bill
because
classes.
it's pictured in the 1950...
July 1950 Arizona Highways. It's pictured in there.
Uh-huh.
And was it identified to him or to the school?
No, it was the school.
Yeah.
But it was the school. Yeah. However, the hallmark on the back is the sun face that Paul Sofke used during that time.
Oh, yeah. There you go. And so how often do you see bogus, fraudulent hallmarks?
All the time.
A lot of them.
All over eBay.
Yeah. And so what is it? Are they pieces that are being made in Asia that are coming over that use a Hallmark? Or are they pieces that are being made currently? That
Both.
Philippines is really bad with the Zuni.
Yeah, and so they're putting, and a lot of it is Zuni marks that they'll put.
Well, initials are really easy to fake and really easy to say, this is, EA, that's, Ariaccio or something. Yeah. Initials are really easy to fake.
But a lot of the Zuni stuff, especially from that 70s, 60s to 80s, is inscribed with, the little, drilled in. I would think that would be a little harder to... It's too time consuming, I would think. A lot of this jewelry that you see that's fake out there is not super valuable. Don't you think that's a true statement?
It's being sold as super valuable.
Some of it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what can a collector do?
Educate themselves.
And how they do that?
Read books.
Yeah.
Talk to dealers. Talk to knowledgeable dealers.
Yeah.
Because there's still some reluctant dealers who don't read books and don't know.
Yeah.
All they know is what they knew when they started.
Right.
And they don't continue their education because there's new information coming out all the time, not just from us. All the time. There's all kinds of Stephen Curtis's Peshlikai book, Fred Peshlikai book, that opened the universe to information on Fred Peshlikai. Yeah. Continue to read.
I think a website like ours too, the Medicine Man Gallery website too, just because we put everything out there and the information, the hallmarks and all that you can use and go, this has its hallmark and it looks like that piece.
Yes.
Versus, crappy inlay that doesn't look like it was made by Zuni. Yeah. So it is a problem. And I know it is a problem. I see it myself. I see things.
We wrote a blog called Caveat Emptor,
yeah,
trying to alert collectors that there are fake hallmarks out there and you really have to pay attention.
Yeah.
They went through that whole large span of Loloma fakes that were terrible and have damaged the business, damaged the jewelry's reputation.
Yep. Yeah, there's a few of those.
And there's a lot of them still floating around out there, too.
Yeah. But we continue to not just write books. We find subject matters that we're interested in, like this particular hallmark, and we maintain a blog website.
How do they find that? How do people find that?
It's at www.messieraz.com.
Yeah, and that's a blog that talks about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll put that at the end of the podcast so people can.
We call it delving deeper into our research.
Yeah,
and there's things that can't make it into the book for whatever reason. When we research, we find this, but we've got to bring it into this and make it concise and.
So she's, for those who are listening, she said had her hands out wide and then came in so larger. Now you also are working on a book that's going to be out shortly on the Patanias.
Yes.
And let's talk a little bit about that because I have great interest. I represent Sam and Frank Jr. both, and a huge collector and just fan of their work. So tell us a little bit about the Patania book that's coming out soon, right?
Okay.
The fall of 2022.
Yeah, that's soon.
Well, it could have been sooner, but due to COVID and shipping delays and shortages, unfortunately, it's going to be the fall of 2022. But we wrote about, they were the only Anglo jewelers in reassessing hallmarks. Mm-hmm. And we wrote about them because of the influence they had on the native jewelers. We had to get their hallmarks in there because a lot of people who collect native jewelry also collect Patania. Mm-hmm. And when we'd see Sam, we presented with Sam once, I think about 7 years ago. We had a presentation with him, Desert Art Museum. And when we'd see him, we'd drop hints. Hey, if you ever want a book written about the family.
Right.
And I think he had somebody who he was working with.
Well, he thought he could write it himself, and then he found out he said, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he thought that
so
for a
they
while.
Brought all the jewelry over to us. A little
Sam,
bit at a time.
Sam approached us April of 2020. And he approached us and said, would you like to talk about writing a book about the family in the Thunderbird shop? And we talked about it a little bit. It didn't take very long for us to say, absolutely, yes, we want to do that.
Yeah, that's something that's really needed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a lot of people that get that all wrong with hallmarks and dates and all that.
It's complicated. Even Frank Patania Jr. admits it's complicated for the hallmarks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the best we could with their help.
And with the whole back of the book, will have the hallmarks and explaining each the way they marked.
Yeah, there'll be an appendix
That'll
in the back
be
of
very
Hallmarks.
helpful.
And we just did an article in
Native American Art Magazine. We did an article on the native silversmiths that worked for the Patania shop that took it into their own career.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
and that was but they were really good to us. They brought all boxes
Sam
and
was-
boxes and boxes of
Sam was fantastic to work with, and Frank was wonderful to get to know. We'd just known him, hi.
Right.
Knew
Except for
Sam a
Pat.
little bit.
Pat knew him in high school.
Yeah, well, I didn't really know him. He was a year ahead of me.
Yeah.
And
Was he a quiet guy then?
I don't remember. We were on split shifts.
Yeah.
Because there was the only high school,
Yeah.
You guys ran in different circles, didn't you?
and we ran in different circles.
Yeah.
I mean, it was entirely different. I was more of the Western style.
Yeah. Nothing's changed.
And I always, I collected Western art
Yes.
and jewelry and what have you. But he was. I knew who he was, and even when I was a kid, I'd stand in line at the Fox Theater to go see Mickey Mouse, and I was right in front of the store, so I'd watch the Indian that worked in the window while we were waiting at the Patania shop. His dad's. That's back in the late 30s.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because the Thunderbird shop was right next door to the Fox, and
Yes.
it opened in 1937.
37. Right?
Yeah.
and I was born in
It
33.
actually opened late 1936.
Yeah.
But 1937 is the year they've always
Yeah,
used.
they always do that. And 27 for the one in
27 in
Santa
Santa Fe.
Yeah.
So Sam brought us the family archives, box upon box of family archives. Sam brought us the family jewels out of the safe.
Yeah.
And we spent months photographing the jewelry. And we also had a couple of heavy collectors help us. And they brought their jewelry over to the house, which we photographed. And Medicine Man Gallery also was very helpful, providing images of jewelry that helped propel the manuscript forward. We began with photographing. I wanted to research. Pat said we should photograph. Pat was right. It was important that we did the photography first. So we did all the photography, and then we ended up researching, and we usually do photography first and write around the images that we
Well, I think
have.
I can see that because if you have it in front of you, the imagery, it allows you to visually translate that to words, and I can't write a Bloom book if I don't go up to the Navajo Res. I mean, I have to spend time and see things and feel things and look at things. I can't write it. I mean, you need that setting. You need that. And it's the same with the artwork.
It was the same with Garden of the Gods Trading Post. We couldn't have written that unless we'd had boots on the ground in Manitou Springs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because we found we'd made a mistake in reassessing hallmarks.
It's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah, and at least we can admit it.
I've got lots of mistakes all over the place. And I correct them when I find them.
Strassenbach's first trading post, the Indian, looked an awful lot like the current trading post.
Because they put it on a postcard
Yeah.
with the image.
With Pikes Peak in the background. But where the Indian was, that was his first trading post from 1925 to 1927.
Yes.
Where it was, you could see Pikes Peak from the Indian. You couldn't see Pikes Peak from Garden of the Gods Trading Post.
Yes.
But he liked to kind of
And the
combine the
Indian
two.
was in the park.
What is now Garden of the Gods Park. It wasn't at the time.
And now it's just on the edge. The trading post.
The trading post is where the Indian was it was torn down probably about 1932, and it's now a parking lot. We were able to show that in Garden of the Gods Trading Post, but yeah, we wouldn't have been able to write that book unless we'd gone up and spent a week in Manitou Springs.
Now, I would like to ask you, Pat, did you ever know, I know you knew Bev Lockett, but did you know Clay Lockett? Did you ever deal
not
with
really.
him? No?
And he was down in the more Pennington in that avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And
For those who don't know who Clay Lockett is, he was one of the great early Native American
and
Indian
Wilbati
art
was
traders.
around also.
Tom Bate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And John Tanner. What about John?
I knew John very well.
Yeah.
And
that was after you started working in the business, though.
Yeah. And John was always go. You could go into his shop and you knew him. He was out on Campbell.
Yeah.
And where downtown was the only place really that all the shops category got
conglomerated.
All downtown, but it wasn't a very. At one time, there were so many shops down there. It was more like Santa Fe.
Yeah, there were so many Indian shops.
The Indians would sit on the a lot of the Papagos, as we called them then, the Tohono now. They'd sit on the street and sell their wares, and they had baskets, and they'd be working on them while they sit out on the street.
And what years would have this been?
That was the late 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
Before the war.
Yeah. And so you've been in this business for over 50 years. What?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What are the changes that you have seen in that time frame that really, changes that you
the
maybe
shops
couldn't
would
even
come
expect?
and go.
Yeah.
The shops would come and go. I mean, it would be 1 week they were in one area, and next week somebody else was in the shop. Just like in the 70s, they sprouted again.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wanted to be in the business in the 70s.
During the boom.
Yeah.
During the boom.
That's the early 70s.
And
late 60s, early 70s.
Any Native American that could hammer a piece of silver was making jewelry.
Right.
And
every Anglo that could also to fill the void. There weren't enough native smiths.
No, they
to
were
make
all
enough
making
jewelry.
stuff. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everybody was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've been in shops in a lot of different places because when we would go on vacations, it was antiquing while we went
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to go someplace where I could shop. And I started out collecting baskets. And I wanted one from each tribe that made baskets.
Sounds like your daughter for Pueblo Pots.
And I was doing pretty good. And I was asked by some antique dealer to do a show out at on Palo Verde.
Barbara Skelton.
Yes.
She was a fixture in Tucson for many years. And she was putting together an antique show, I think, and asked Pat if she'd do a presentation on native basketry in association with this antique show she was putting on.
Mm-hmm.
So Pat said, for some reason, I was involved too. And we ended up, that was our very first presentation. We took some poster board and drew out wefts and how baskets were woven and gave a presentation on native basketry.
And when was that? What year would that been?
God.
30, 40 years ago?
Late 1980s, I think.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Long time ago. 30 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And so what do you think Indian art's going to be? Native arts and traders like you and me in, say, 10 years, 15 years?
Well, people like you that are spread out into other art along with it will do well. But I can't see individual shops.
And why do you think that is?
Because I think eBay and the internet, so many people have to go that way to sell their wares.
Yeah.
That I don't think there'll be big, brick and mortar stores.
I think another part of the problem for myself is there aren't a lot of
young collectors coming into the market.
Mm-hmm. As our friends are passing away,
Though you'd be surprised.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a lot of young collectors. Maybe in jewelry,
because
but not
they're all
so
coming
much
on the internet. That's where they come in on. Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yep.
So I was thinking that there'd be a change. I know native artists will always have a market.
Yes.
And that's fortunate. I don't know about antique art though.
Yeah, it's going to change. It is changing. There's no doubt. But with, it's a dual-edged sword because you have the internet also allows greater opportunity for more people to be exposed.
That's true.
And, there's a big world out there. And I know for us, we deal in both contemporary native material that we get from artists, like Shanta Begay or Tim Yazzie or Jared, Chavez or, all these different individuals. And, but we also have the other material, which we really like, the older material, where we need books like this. We need people that are, have the knowledge. And I think that's one of the reasons I want to do this show, is to be able to capture, the voices and the stories that you guys have. And hopefully maybe some of the other dealers out there will give back a little more too and write some books. I think that's important to do. So.
It is. It's hard to get a publisher, though.
Yeah.
There are only a handful of publishers left that want to put out books on native material, native subject matters.
Yeah, what are the main ones that you find you can doing it?
We've worked with Schiffer for reassessing hallmarks, and they also will be publishing the Patania book, which the working title is Legendary Patania Jewelry.
We think.
Which is, the working title. We don't know. We don't know yet. We don't have a cover or anything. That's kind of Sam Patania's tagline, which we thought for a long time what to do, and we thought, that's perfect. Rio Nuevo in town also will publish Native American subject matter.
But I think they're going to do it in a small fashion.
Well, they did Barry Walsh's Kachina book, which is a really great book.
Yeah.
So they will still do native subject matter, but Schiffer's really the main one. I think Gibbs Smith up in Utah will do some native subject matter. But it's Museum of New Mexico.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you have to bring subvention money with you. We never were able to. We don't have the backing to bring subvention with it. So we'd proposed, I think, the tile book to them, and they had refused it, but also said that we would have to bring subvention with us, and we didn't bother to propose to them any longer. With the closing of Northland Press a long, long time ago in Flagstaff, that really took a lot of, native subject matter off the table. So we typically just go to Schiffer.
Or self-published. That's the other possibility.
That's not good for us because the nightmare is warehousing and distribution.
Yeah. No, distribution's the hardest.
It is.
Yeah.
One of the other pitfalls with self-publishing can be not having editorial
input.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think if you self-publish, you have to have other people look at your manuscript and all that, and you need a good editor, a real editor.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
there's been a recent self-published book that needed an editor.
Yeah.
And
very bad.
Yeah, which was disappointing, but
it does happen.
It does happen. Oh, mistakes happen in every book. We're all human.
Yeah.
We're all human.
So in closing, any words of wisdom for the people that are listening? Both of you. I'll just start with you, Pat. You're the elder statesman here.
You go with Kim first.
No,
right.
Let her go first. I don't have words of wisdom. I think people should collect what they love, not collect what people tell them they should collect.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And,
I agree with
and
that.
buy the best you can on your budget.
Yeah.
And continue to upgrade as well as you can, but don't make yourself go into debt so heavily that you're sorry you've bought art.
Yeah.
Buy within your budget, but buy the best you can within your budget.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
And educate yourself.
Though many times I've gone into debt way beyond my budget.
So have we.
There you go. So the reality, it's easy to say that, but then when the real piece comes up. It's easy to say
that, but when something comes that you love, you just...
There you go.
You just got to sometimes... Yeah, but there's a lot of times for me, if it's not in my budget, I don't consider it.
Yeah.
And my budget's pretty middle of the road.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I love it, but I can't swing it.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Pat, anything?
No, something that you really need, you will get if you want it. That's the way I look at it. You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
There you go.
And that's the way I look at it when we're outbid on something that we wanted really bad.
Yeah, when we miss something on eBay, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Yeah.
But we have made some nice finds on eBay also.
Yeah.
But one of our first pieces of Sarah
Yeah.
was a aluminum tray with the
Knife wing.
the knife wing figure in it, and he had it advertised as a coaster
Mm-hmm.
on
A tin coaster.
coaster.
Those are kind of true, I guess.
a tin coaster, and it's a good sized tray. And what did we pay for it? 100 and something.
It was very well priced, and I know it was probably under $200.
Well, I mean, that's where knowledge comes in, right?
Yeah.
Knowledge to search under coasters and things like that, and to see what it is. You know.
Oh, there's so much competition now; it's almost impossible to get a good find on eBay now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's true. Online auctions and all this, it's hard to find something you would say is a bargain, but there is so much great material. It is a way that you can find great material. And the market is probably more transparent than it ever has been, which is good. You know, that means price structure, really you understand what price structure is. It's not a guessing game. You know, there is really an objective criteria for all this stuff. But it's just taken the internet and transparency to be able to really figure out what it is.
Yeah.
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 And we're there
Well,
now.
we've had to buy on a budget.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I'm really glad for the internet for native
Yeah.
artists to be able to market themselves
Yeah.
better also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's
That's where I think we'll see a lot more growth actually is in the native artists themselves and recognition as well on a higher level, a higher plane.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's where I see this going, and fairly significantly, I think, in the next very short period of time. I think it's really changing and changing quickly. Yeah, I'm going to have Victor Beck on. He's going to come on, and we're going to talk.
Nice.
With him.
Nice.
So and we'll have that discussion with Nanaba, his daughter, who is also an artist and very interesting. So upcoming podcasts for Medicine Man Gallery. So. And the Art Dealer Diaries. All right. Well, thank you both so much for coming in on a Saturday.
Thank
on
you
your
for
day
asking us
off.
to participate.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be part of this
Yeah,
series.
No. Oh yeah, no. Well, you're important cogs in the wheel, you know. And unfortunately, our wheel's losing a lot of the spokes every so often.
It's so sad when one of our, a lot of our friends and collectors have passed, and it just makes our little circle even smaller, which is unfortunate.
Well, that's why we do this show. One of the reasons to do the show is to let people know.
Yeah.
You know, this is a viable business that you can do. It's an interesting business. It's a unique
in my
business.
age group, there's not many of us left that collects.
Do you want to tell them your age group?
I'm 88
and proud of it.
and proud of
Very
it
good.
that I'm still around.
Still kicking and still buying and selling. All right.
And still researching and writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The next book, 22nd next year in the fall, the Patania book.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll be having an opening and doing a book signing here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Hopefully the first one.
Maybe a big sale too.
Yeah.
And because it's, I hope Frank Jr. and Pat's still around.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I do too. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it very much. All right. Thanks.